Hey everyone, and welcome to Dungeons & Dragons Horror Stories with DnD Doge. In today's episode, we have a tale about a dungeon master that goes to scummy lengths in order to guilt her players into staying. A story about a forever DM making a secret chat in order to try and steal another dungeon master's players, and much more. So, without further ado, let's get right into the cringe. DM calls party in for Discord interrogation call to stop criticism of her campaign. By Reddit user, Bay of the Mage. Thought I'd finally share this story, as I'm more than a year removed from it now. I was invited into a Curse of Strahd Discord server by a good friend to play with their other friends. The thing was that I already wasn't too fond of the DM, but I wanted to play with my friends that were there already. Now, a lot of drama would unfold outside of the campaign that would reveal that DM was a very awful person, but I'll just talk about her DM behavior. While I honestly quite enjoy aspects of how they ran the game, they were very self-absorbed and didn't really allow for player freedom outside of what she wanted. For starters, she inserted her original character from a different sci-fi themed campaign into Curse of Strahd through dimension-hopping shenanigans. The character existed for them to have weirdly uncomfortable and unconsensual gore scenes. They also put this character in to introduce modern-day tech into Curse of Strahd. Along with this, they seemed to encourage murder hoboing. This wouldn't be a problem, except all but one of us in the party wanted this, and the one person who did would take advantage of the offer, leading to sessions being halted. She also had a weird vendetta against one of the players, not allowing them to do certain things, while pushing the others to do these things, just to anger the player. Needless to say, I was ready to leave anyways, but then the Discord call happened. So, DM holds a group meeting, saying that she had some announcements. We all hop in, thinking it's about another campaign that she's announcing, but almost immediately, it becomes apparent what she's doing. The DM says, "Hey player, you seem disconnected and unhappy with the campaign. Are you not having fun?" Now, in private, I have no issue with providing feedback. But in a call, where both our mutual friends and her friends only are there, she knew what she was doing, especially as we were well aware of how awkward it would have been if I spoke out. She then asked the same question to two other players, both of who I learned were also 1 foot out of the door. It was a slimy manipulation tactic to guilt us all into staying. I could barely even pay attention to the rest of the call, as I felt that I was on the spot now. This call also turned out to be one of the many factors as to why our mutual friends agreed on cutting her off. Nowadays, we're all happy in our own campaign, but still joke about the weird interrogation call. Edit. So, this seemed to be controversial, huh? I guess I should add some clarifications. The call was done with 7 people, including the DM and I. The players who were interrogated were done so one by one, in a way where the DM spoke in a "I'll cry if you criticize me" voice. I should also mention that in the same call, she made a point of saying things directly meant to piss people off. For example, saying, "I won't do something if you keep telling me to do it," just as a guy waiting for certain updates to be made to his character, after a year of waiting, asked her. Yeah, I have to agree with OP there. It's one thing to ask for some constructive criticism from your players in order to improve and make sure that everyone is having fun, but it is obvious that this DM just did it because she saw the writing on the wall that a lot of the players were not having fun and just wanted to make them feel guilty in a public way. I mean, what was she expecting? She would purposefully not let a player do something and then rub it in their face when she tried to have others do it? Or letting one player that wanted to be a murder hobo do so when no one else enjoyed it? It seems like this DM just got enjoyment in tormenting people. So I say good riddance, and I hope everyone is having a better time now with a DM that isn't a borderline sociopath. Let's move on. Player treats my character's quirk as a problem to solve. By Reddit user, Too Fast, Too Furious 123. So, this is an old story from 3 or maybe 4 years ago, so I may not remember all the details. First, I have to tell you a little about my character in this campaign. I was playing a female human fighter by the name of Cassandra. She had this little quirk. She was trying to avoid showing her face as much as possible, so almost always wore a helmet. A bit like Din Djarin in Mandalorian, but less extreme. She was usually taking it off only to eat, sleep, or when she was taking a bath. Sometimes she was taking it off when she was away from public areas, but that too was very rare. She was also very defensive about it and didn't let anyone take her helmet off. She had a reason for that though. In her past, she was a warden, a member of an independent order of knights. Wardens recognized no higher authority and did not bow before any kings or lords. Their job was to keep peace and bring justice. Covering their faces was one of the traditions of this order. Knights were to be anonymous and nameless, faceless confidants of justice. And even though this order fell apart over 20 years ago, Cassandra was still holding to those traditions. And this is where Kat and her character, a tiefling cleric named Izzy, come in. Kat took a completely different approach to our game. I preferred a more serious and realistic approach, but her approach was more or less like, even though our characters know each other for only 2 days, you are all like family to my character, and she will gladly help you solve all of your problems. Which, in my opinion, is not a problem by itself. Very helpful and naive people happen to be a thing, so I could believe that her character was like that. The problem was the fact that, for some reason, Kat and her character decided that the fact that my character is quiet, calm, and hides her face for most of the time is a problem or trauma that needs to be solved, or something like that. So basically, beginning from session 2 or 3, a fairly long series of attempts began of her trying to remove the helmet from my character's face. Sometimes, Izzy was trying to do it by herself, and other times, she tried to persuade Cassandra to do so. It was okay at first, and I was even trying to talk her out of this idea, explaining that it's a tradition between wardens, that Cassandra knows many wardens that were not able to recognize each other's faces because they were identified by their helmets and markings on them. She herself had a hard time remembering her mentor's face, but she remembers every scratch on his helmet. Sadly, this did not convince Izzy. It very, very quickly became annoying. Almost every session, 1 or 2 times, Izzy accosted my character about her helmet. There were even cases when she tried to take the helmet away from my character when she was not wearing it. Once, Kat even asked our DM if she could roll for persuasion to convince my character to take off the helmet in the middle of a busy town. Luckily, our DM listened to me and said that she cannot do that. With time, Kat started asking me about it outside of the game, and to this day, I think she was clearly impatient. Sometimes, she was evidently irritated when her nice and friendly attempts were unsuccessful. It was around this time that I found out that Kat's character found my character attractive. Despite the fact that she had only seen her face a few times, and 95% of that time, she was completely covered with thick plate, chainmail, and a gambeson. It might not be that important for the story, but I believe it could be one of the reasons why she was trying to interact with my character the most, and was annoyed when my character was not interested in hers. This story ended quite abruptly. During one of our visits to a local tavern, our characters decided to eat dinner. Cassandra announced that she would eat afterwards because she did not want to take off the helmet in such a large crowd of strangers. Then Kat came up with a brilliant idea. While everyone was busy with their own affairs, she described how her character, Izzy, sneaks up on Cassandra from behind and grabs her helmet and tries to take it off. I was obviously not happy with this and started to protest, so DM made us roll dice. I don't remember if it was a dex roll or something else. Fortunately, I was able to roll higher, and Cassandra had managed to prevent Izzy from taking her helmet off. I then decided that both I and my character have had enough of it, and Cassandra tries to hit Izzy. I rolled my dice, and I succeeded. And this is the moment where the drama began. Not in the game, but outside of it. Kat just exploded with anger, She acted like I punched her, not her imaginary character. There was a lot of screaming and arguing that basically comes down to Kat saying that my character is ungrateful and doesn't let anyone help her, and me explaining to her that Cassandra doesn't need any help with anything, and Izzy is not her friend, because from the first day they've known each other, she was trying to convince her to break her traditions. We ended our session there, and for the next 3 or 4 weeks, we didn't even consider going back to it. But luckily, in the end, we managed to get our group back together and continued playing. Honestly, I think both OP and Kat took things a bit too seriously here, and let it get out of control. This whole situation probably could have been solved if OP and Kat just communicated a tad better. OP could have just told Kat out of character what Izzy was doing to Cassandra was really starting to bother them, and 9 chances out of 10, Kat would have stopped. Instead, it just got to a boiling point where OP had their character hit hers, though it does sound like Kat took that way too seriously too, so who knows. At least it sounds like everyone was able to make up and continue on with the game. Let's move on. Forever DM joins campaign, then rage quits 2 sessions in. By Reddit user BubblySample8142. This is less of a horror story, and more of probably one of the weirdest interactions I've had. It was my first time being a DM in a 5e DnD game. We were about 5 or so sessions in, and things were going really well. I was a little slow on some things, but my players were more than understanding, as they were all my friends, and we were all having a great time. After we ended the 5th session, one of my players approached me, telling me that he was talking about our campaign to a friend of his. His friend was really interested in playing, and was complaining that in his group, he was a forever DM, and really wanted to be a player again. My friend asked if he could join, and I said I would think about it. I ended up playing some video games with this guy to get to know him and talk about the campaign. We will call him Druid. He was super nice, seemed like a good fit, and so I held his session 0 with his level 5 character and invited him to our next session at the time, which was around the 7th. All was well with the first session he was in, and he fit in super well. He was really charismatic and funny, and my players loved his goofy druid he made. Then session 8 came around. During it, he ended up using his wild shape twice in a single turn of combat. At the time, I didn't realize that cost an action to cast, and at the end of the session, once combat was already over, a player of mine spoke up. A rules lawyer, not Druid's friend. They politely said, "Hey, I don't play a druid that much, but I think it cost an action to cast wild shape. Just to let you know, DM." So I quickly read up more on druids and his specific circle, thanked them, and simply said, "Okay, you're right. From now on, Druid, we will play it like that. Since I am new to DMing, I want to stick as close to the rulebooks as possible." He agreed, and we left. That night, Druid called me up and told me that he thinks that he should be able to cast Wild Shape twice in a round, because it would be cool, and his character is so much stronger than everyone else, even though they were all at the same level, and it would be way more fun. I told him that I simply wasn't comfortable enough as a DM yet. I wasn't sure if that would end up becoming super imbalanced later on in the game, and I want to stick to the rules as written. He explained that when he DMs, he shifts rules all the time, and it's fine. To which I stood my ground and told him that I'm just not as experienced as him, and I want to play the game with the rules as written. He said fine, whatever, in a casual tone, and hung up, and I didn't think much of it. The next day, I got lunch with one of my players, and his phone was blowing up. I asked if he needed to take care of that, to which he told me no, because it was Druid blowing up a secret group chat that he made after his first session. Apparently, he was going off since the day previous about how I am the lamest DM ever, and how I'm intentionally nerfing him so he can't have fun. He was trying to convince my players to leave my campaign to join a new one that he was going to make. I called him up and asked him what all this was about. He sounded fine last night on the phone, so why was he crap-talking me in a private chat? He then told me that the chat did not exist and that my friend made it all up. I told him that I was physically looking at the chat and he removed my friend from it immediately. He then told me that he was leaving the campaign since I was so crazy and making up things about a chat that didn't exist. The mutual friend I had ended up following his leave in a single session after, via ghosting me. It's super bizarre, but the rest of my players and I ended up having fun, and the campaign ended up lasting pretty long too. Man, talk about being completely unreasonable and conniving. First, the Forever DM should have known that being a first-time DM isn't exactly the easiest thing to do, and should have just let OP just use the written rules to keep things simple. Instead, he pulled the "this is how I do things" as an attempt to pull the experience card in order to make his character overpowered. Then to go behind OP's back and make a secret chat just to smack talk OP and try to pull OP's players away is such a bitch-made move. Like, did he really expect that the other players, who are OP's friends mind you, to not let him know about it? Then, to act like it didn't exist in a pathetic attempt to gaslight OP, even though OP saw the evidence, is really dumb. It does suck that Forever DM did manage to pull one of OP's players away, but at least it sounds like everyone else had fun and the campaign was a success. Let's move on. And before we do, how about some kitties? And to think, I almost forgot to include kitties in this video. Good thing I fixed that real quick. Anyway, let's move on. Magical short sword? Ew. Wait, it does what? By Reddit user NoHat5730. This was about 14 years ago, so again, details are sparse. I got together with a local gaming group run by a local legend on the scene. He was the kind of guy who could spin finely woven tales, regardless of the setting. This time, however, he took the player's chair next to mine, while his best bud ran a game of old school Stormbringer. For those who don't know, Stormbringer was a very powerful magic sword that was featured in a bunch of the novels. Just a short bit on character creation. Every aspect of it was random. So what do I roll? A carpenter. No combat abilities of any kind, while everyone else rolled up something at least somewhat oriented towards adventuring. I was introduced to the party as my poor carpenter self got a severe case of curiosity and headed to where they were. One of the party, we'll call him jerk number 1, had separated from the rest of the group and found a potential place for lots of good stuff, and a death trap that killed him. Immediately, he starts rolling up a new character for the sole purpose of getting his stuff back, including a magical cloak of sneakiness, I think. Gotta love metagaming, right? Before he could employ this new character, however, he had to leave. Instead, the DM said nope to the metagame, and when I found the place and survived the trap, I got the loot, including the cloak, and the most valuable treasure anyone could possibly ever receive. Not gold, not jewels, not even the most powerful magic weapon ever. I'm talking about a deed to land, 40 acres and a mansion. The next week, the first thing Jerk 1 did was yell at me that he wanted his cloak back, and not wanting to be a jerk myself, I let him have it. Later in the session, we beat a mini-boss and looted the stuff off of him, including a magical short sword. Both he and another player, who we'll call jerk number 2, rejected it out of hand. They wanted a longsword, but not this, whatever it was. So guess who they dumped it off to? That's right, the lonely carpenter, me. After the session, levels were gained, and I was persuaded to level up my short sword skill, which I did to a maybe semi-passable level. But then, the sword's true nature came to light. It was revealed that it was a sister blade to Stormbringer itself. Later on, another fight happened, which my poor, simple carpenter barely survived. So, what does a simple tradesman with newfound wealth and a bunch of land do after a brush with death? I retired my guy, and he took his super short sword home with him. To that, Jerk number 1 and jerk number 2 being a bit salty would be an understatement. I passed a note over to the aforementioned legend, noting how unhappy they were at what I did. His response? Boo effing who. Long story short, I rolled up a new character, and the next week, the jerks were still complaining. The week after that, however, things blew up. Too bad I wasn't there to see it though. Apparently Jerk 2 started going off the rails over every little thing, and Jerk 1 was blatantly cheating on his rolls. Both men were kicked out, and Jerk 2's wife went right with him, so the campaign ended right there and then. First, I have to say big ups to that DM for not letting Jerk number 1 metagame. That would make absolutely no sense for a new character that didn't know his old one, or even know where he died, to go there to recover the items, even though Jerk 1 still demanded OP give him the cloak. It sounds like those players just wanted to be the most powerful and hog the spotlight, so it is funny when they come across the short sword that they didn't want anything to do with because it's a puny weapon, and just hawk it off to OP's character. Then when it's revealed that it's actually a pretty decent blade, they all of a sudden want it. Plus, I would say that OP played the character pretty well. It would make sense for a character that wasn't much of a fighter to have a brief brush with death, decide that adventuring wasn't for him, and just retire to his new land. It kinda reminds me of Bilbo in a way. But that will do it for today. As always, I appreciate all of you, and may your games remain horror story free. Until next time.